Well, now what? I'll have to get more stuff. What's in the shed? I don't know, it's locked. Why is it locked? It's always been locked. Oh, you know, we're gonna... No, that's the second up I ever been.
I was so surprised on this rewatch after having seen Shaun of the Dead so many times since I first watched the original Dawn of the Dead, of how equally funny they both are. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're good. I love you're throwing out these left field audio clips. I'm always expecting a clip from one of the movies we're talking about, but then you always toss out these crazy ones. Yeah, I mean, they're both great comedies. I think Dawn of the Dead becomes a little more humorous the older you get, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah.
Definitely the comedy is very intended as you rewatch it. But this is Film Trace, folks. What are we doing? It's a podcast? Is that what we're doing, Chris? I don't even know these days.
It's like a conversation, but we record it. Yeah.
We're on season 15, not 14. I keep on saying season 14 for this season.
Ooh, okay.
Season 15.
Who's counting him?
I am, apparently. We're doing Visionary Remakes this year, or this season. We've done Nosferatu for the 2020s. True Grit was the last episode from the 2010s. And this episode is a big one for me. I love Dawn of the Dead. So we're doing Dawn of the Dead from 2004, along with the original Dawn of the Dead, George Romero, 1978. We have a special guest here today, Karl from Smash Cut Movie Reviews. Karl, why don't you introduce yourself and kind of let us know what you've been up to?
Yeah, hi. I'm Karl. I'm a critic at Smash Cut, also an editor at the New York Times, but that's boring compared to the movie stuff. What have I been up to? I've honestly been hibernating a lot recently.
Sure, totally, yeah.
After festival season last year and now the crazy Oscar season, I'm just hiding and honestly been watching a lot of, catching up on a lot of movies that I've missed, / just going to a lot of rep screenings, which has been really nice. So this was a nice project, honestly.
I love it.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us, man.
Yeah, excited to be here.
I was looking at your letterbox, and I saw that you had Black Christmas in one of your favorite films, and I was like, finally somebody we get on here who loves the same movies I do.
Someone with taste.
Exactly. Yeah. Speaking of a movie with 2 horrible remakes.
Right?
Oh seriously? Yeah, the last one from, was it Blumhouse did that one? Oh, unwatchable. Yeah. Unwatchable. So bad. So Dawn of the Dead, I think we got to get, there's so much baggage here. Yeah. We got to get our baggage off our chests here on Dawn of the Dead, both of these movies. Usually what we like to do is just talk about, what our background is with the movies. When was the last time we saw it? When did we first see it? And both of these, for me, I saw Dawn of the Dead 2004 opening weekend, I think. And so I've seen it probably, this remake, a lot. The original was probably my favorite film in my 20s. I saw it in high school, didn't really get it. And then I think the box set came out in like 2004, like that ultimate cut or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I just watched it on repeat, like over and over and over again. So it became definitely, I would say in my late 20s, early 30s, it was definitely my favorite film of all time. So I have a lot of baggage with both of these movies. Karl, what about you? Like, had you seen the original a long time ago, or is this maybe your first time seeing it?
So this is my first time seeing the original, actually.
Amazing.
I know. I watched Night of the Living Dead so many times. I own it on Criterion, all this stuff.
Yeah.
I just never seeked it out for some reason.
Yeah.
And then the 2004 film, my love for horror came from I'm the youngest of all my cousins, just torturing me with these things. Jokes on them. It's just made me into a depraved human that just likes horror now. So I've watched it with them and then watched it again many times, honestly, probably on like just TNT or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, the original, I mean, again, I love Night of the Living Dead. So I think having, so now kind of completing, I guess, the duology of it was a nice experience.
Have you seen Day of the Dead, the third one?
I've not seen Day of the Dead.
Oh, you got to see it. If you like this one at all, you got to see the third one. What about the 2004 version? Did you see that back in the day when it came out, or is it kind of newer to you as well?
It was back in the day when it came out. That's one of the movies that I feel like my cousins and I just would watch constantly. at the time, especially, and I'm sure we're going to talk eventually about the critical consensus around Dawn of the Dead, which is like there's kind of no consensus, but people loved it. I mean, like it was like it was like one of the few good horror movies in that. Not that's going to be controversial, but it's one of the.
That's fine. We love controversy here.
Yes. One of the 2000s horror movies that was broadly accessible, that was also somewhat palatable.
Yeah. Totally fair take.
And so, but I'm rewatching it this time. Yesterday was the first time I saw it, honestly, in probably like half a decade at least, maybe a decade. Nice. Who knows?
Yeah. Chris, what about you? What's your history with these two lovely movies?
I actually think you put me on to the original Dawn of the Dead. Back in the day. I had, similar to Karl, I'd seen Night of the Living Dead and like did, my own film school thing. I've talked about this on the pod a few times of just like raiding the library's DVD collection in high school and trying to, get a decent primer on all the classics and especially in the horror genre. And it never really occurred to me, to be honest, to like really explore outside of that, because it seemed like that was like the canon entry, right? And then I kind of started poking around into, I had seen the Halloween sequels, the Friday the 13th sequels, and it just like I had somehow kind of just unfairly correlated the sequels, Romero's, later zombie films, as kind of parallel to the quality of the other franchises sequels, and how it just kind of got recycled and worse. And then when you told me about it, I feel like it might have even been that summer that we lived across the street from each other.
Yeah, could have been.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I watched that once and I was just like, my God, and I really think like, while I loved it at the time, I didn't revisit it until prepping for this episode. So it feels kind of special in that way, that perhaps more than any other movie that we've talked about on umpteen episodes here, Dan, like this is the one that I associate with you the most.
I love that.
So there's that baggage. So we're all already, on the precipice of once again ruining our friendship on this program, but we'll see. The remake, however, I saw when it came out, and I totally think you're right, Karl. It was an absolute crowd pleaser. Like, even though I don't like the movie, like it's one of those movie theater memories where it's like, man, like it was just like electric. Like the crowd was so into it, and so I was thereby into it as well. But then like as soon as I like try to rewatch it on home video, I don't know, it just like did not stand up for me almost immediately on a second watch. And I don't think that I've revisited since trying to rewatch it on video and kind of having a distaste for it. And I remember that one of the reasons I just like left a bad taste in my mouth on home viewing compared to in the cinema was that ending. And we'll get to that, the ending of the two different versions of a similar story. And I have to say, like I was kind of bopping back and forth. I was sick in bed watching this again, the remake for this show, and it almost felt like it's just such a weird buzz back and forth between like, this is a really cool set piece to this makes me want to throw up, like, and not in a good way that the best horror movies do.
No, of course.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at, where it's just like it's pretty much a binary for me. It was just like, this is one of those pairings where it's just like, sorry, it's boring, but it's true. The original is amazing. The remake is kind of trash.
Kind of. Well, yeah, it's tough. Tough words. Tough words.
Let's get into it. Where did these movies come from?
So the original, of course, Night of the Living Dead comes out in 1968, and George Romero kind of, hits a home run. It was a very strange release too. Like they put Night of the Living Dead on during like drive-ins, like in the afternoon or something, like matinees, and so like kids were seeing it and stuff. No one had really any idea what it was all about, the gratuitous nature of it, the political messages behind it. It landed like an atom bomb, and one would think that George would go back and make another zombie movie right away. He didn't really want to. He He wanted to move on to some other things. He was always kind of obsessed with doing other things besides zombie movies. But of course, the zombie movie became his sort of claim to fame. So, he eventually, he's from the Pittsburgh area. He has friends who, I think from his school or something like that, had been part of this development project on a mall. And this is when malls, were not everywhere, but they started to pop up across the United States. And so the Monroeville Mall, he visited it, and then he kind of got the idea of survivors being here in the zombie apocalypse. And so that was sort of this spark. I think he put it away for a while, but then Dario Argento kind of randomly reached out to him, and the spark got relit, and he went over to Rome to visit him and ended up writing the script for Dawn of the Dead, and kind of the rest is history. And it's one of those movies where I think that, or the inception of it, so to speak, it is it kind of feels very indie to me. Like, I think that one of the more surprising things about the original Dawn of the Dead is that, you see it has this stature of like, oh, it's a masterpiece of horror. But when you actually sit down and watch it, you do sort of realize that it is kind of rough around the edges.
Oh, yeah.
And there's definitely some gonzo things going on there. I don't know if you guys kind of picked up on that in this rewatch, that it feels very indie to me. Did you guys kind of feel that, or did it feel pretty polished to you?
It feels like Night of the Living Dead. The black and white does a lot to hide its rougher edges.
Totally.
And by putting this in color, it highlights a lot of them. And I know that one of the main focuses of, not really criticism, but pieces of the movie is the color of the blood. It's off because they didn't know how to color it properly for that, or the color of the zombies is a little off because they didn't know how to color them for color. And so, yeah, it does feel bootstrapped, but also the production, from what I have read, was a local production. It's like the fact that Romero is from Pittsburgh is the reason that it was able to exist kind of at all, and that's at that scale.
Yeah, I think that it comes through so clearly, and I think that still seeing this when I was in my 20s, I hadn't really kind of grasped or really gotten into the details of what it means when a movie is produced locally versus through a studio system. And now that, having all that knowledge after years of watching and studying movies and coming back to it, it's like the closest vibe I could think of around the same time period is Assault on Precinct 13. The original Carpenter version, speaking of bad remakes.
Yeah, I was thinking about that all the time. Like, as I was watching this, I was like, oh, this is basically Assault on Precinct 13.
Right. And it was, and I remember seeing that movie for the first time. And again, that's the other thing that makes Dawn of the Dead special, is that it's not just a horror movie. It's also like an action war movie. It's, it's an outright comedy, like we said at the cold open. And the reason that they're able to, I think, get a lot of those kitchen sink elements in there is because the fact that it's like this, it's just like Romero on set with buddies and actors that he didn't try to vie for. He's not dealing with any star power. It's just literally these are some interesting people that auditioned, I think fit the vibe, and they're just having the time of their life making a zombie movie in an abandoned mall. That's incredible. That's the coolest possible experience you could have for a production of a famous movie. I think that it gives it character more than it detracts from any kind of enjoyment. But it also is very much one of those things. I'm always thinking about what would my students think if I showed this to them? And I think that it might be tough for younger people, especially today, to get past the stuff like the makeup and the fake blood.
The paper mache head in the beginning.
Yeah,
that was supposed to be the female character committing suicide at the end. They were reused the head because they decided on a new ending.
Wow, that's cool.
That's how they got. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, economical.
It's that's what's funny. I always wonder when people go back and see this now, because of its sort of bootstrapped nature. It was also funny you mentioned that he's working with no names here, but in some interview he was complaining that well, they're SAG, so we have to pay them some money. It's he just he was so gonzo about the whole thing. I do wonder about maybe leapfrogging forward even to legacy a little bit about this movie. Like, how does it play for me as somebody who saw it when I was like 17 or 16? It was actually pretty far over my head. It wasn't until I was in like my 20s and studying like politics and like literary theory and Marxism and all of this stuff, where all of it started to click for me and be like, oh, this is what Romero's saying. Like, he has a very specific political viewpoint that he's trying to get across. Do you think that plays now with people or younger people, like Gen Z and younger? Like, I don't know. Like, Chris, you have the closest connection to, that age. What do you think in terms of how it plays now?
Well, I mean, like the most obvious kind of elephant in the room is like malls aren't really a thing. Like, I live here in Minneapolis with the Mall of America, and like the average teen at my school, you talk about Mall of America and they'll just roll their eyes. Like, that place, like it's not known as like the place to go, nor is like the average suburban shopping mall. Like, you might go to the mall because that's where a restaurant is, but like even most of these formerly very indoors one-stop shop places, they all now have like their outdoor fronts, and so it's just like a glorified strip mall. And so it does not have the same cultural meaning or attachment that it once did. But I also think I don't know, I'm curious. So Karl, when you because if you're watching this for the first time, and I assume like you, even if you're a bit younger than us, you grew up with what were like malls. Was that like a thing? Because it definitely was where Dan and I grew up.
Yeah, it was the thing.
Oh no, I grew up in New Jersey, so that was like
land of malls.
Exactly. Basically, it's like there was multiple choices of malls you could go to at any time. But it is interesting because the 78 version kind of comes right at the start of the rise of the shopping mall, or that concept of the mall. And then the 2004 version, which is around when I was growing up, came at the tail end of that. Like, it was still existing. It was still part of culture, but like it wasn't, it didn't feel the same, like had the same weight as it did, I guess, in the 90s, especially. Mm-hmm. So that part of it, the mall part of it, I understood the implication of it, of like the consumerism of it, of the like the line where Peter says maybe they're just coming back because they're familiar with it. Mm-hmm. That Ving Rhames says the same thing in the new one, which doesn't hit nearly the same, because you're just like, okay, cool. And also because it's like the one line that tries to say anything in that movie about anything larger. But then you have what I was surprised was how long it took us to get to the mall. It took 45 minutes to get there. And before that, you have the news scene. You have the raid on the apartment, and I was like, oh, this is political. he was right. Going in. Exactly. And then the mall stuff came up. I was like, okay, this is. I get it, and I see how this fits at the time. Doesn't hit quite as much, and then you kind of, and then you fall into this like routine of the characters, and then it feels like it turns into a character study piece. But the political implications of it felt, especially at the beginning, felt so relevant before they became less relevant when the mall came into play.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I think, as a younger person, that attracted me to it. Me and Chris grew up in suburban Milwaukee, which is where 2004 takes place.
I was going to bring that
up. But we grew up in, like, I would call it like very conservative. It didn't seem very conservative at the time, but growing, as more distance, it was a very like GOP heavy place. And I just remember, Dawn of the Dead and like the ideas and theories that are represented in that, the political theories, it was like the only place that I could hear stuff like that. And this is even true when I was in college. I went to a very conservative college down in North Carolina. And it was so refreshing to me to see an American talking about consumerism, talking about like stratification and class stratification and the end result of like mass media and our institutions. And I think the thing that sticks out to me more than anything is I was kind of like a curmudgeon when I was younger. And I think Romero's viewpoint is so dark about humanity that I just saw like a kindred spirit in sort of what he was saying. I mean, do you guys, Karl specifically, because it's your first time seeing it, like, what was your takeaway of like what Romero thinks about humanity and society in general? Like, what do you see in there?
Yeah, I mean, even the portrayal of it as this satire itself is almost referring to the current the then current state of the U.S. society as like a joke. The starting at in the news, the newsroom scene first, you're watching a large media production lie to the public, and then you follow that up by the apartment raid when again another institution is murdering people for disobeying the law. But then you have that scene in the beginning where you're like, oh, but they're also kind of lying to us at the same time. Granted, it did end up being the truth, but it's especially the fact that it was specifically a low-income housing with a lot of Black and brown people. The distrust in those institutions is just kind of inherent. And then of course you have all these racist cops that are rushing in, and essentially like driving them out. And that especially now with the recent election really stuck with me. Of this, like, oh, we're literally trying to sweep these people out of this building indiscriminately. And then the other scene that is so unassuming, but I found powerful, is when you watch the militia marching to this, honky tonky country song, and they're so happy and they're so excited to be killing these things, and the army is like, good job, and all that. I'm like, oh wow, this is, I say, the brain rot, like the brain rot of just like a fun thing, like that this is not actually a horrible tragedy that is happening. They're like turning it into this own its game. And then you kind of watch the characters in the movie go the opposite direction, where like they're starting serious and then they land in the mall and then they kind of forget that it's happening. It's this how do you react to tragedy that is happening around you, that I thought was also prescient in a way, but I guess also relevant at the time, and history just repeats itself. He packs a lot in there.
He does. He's got a lot of thoughts. He's got a lot of, and it's very layered too. I think that's one of the things too. And going back and rewatching it, it's like, oh man, like I'd say the opening 40 minutes of this is just, to me, just so I watch it over and over. Like I love,
it's masterful.
Yeah, the chaos. I think, to me, the most attractive thing about it to me is how he depicts society falling apart. And like, through lived experience and through, living around with the country and stuff like that, like that to me is like a very accurate depiction of how people really act around each other and what happens in response to tragedy or stress or threats on your life. Like things fall apart quite fast. I don't know, Chris, do you see it in this way? Do you see it as like, do you agree with Romero's like pitch black viewpoint of humanity, because he's so fatalist? Oh, he's so fatalist.
See, the thing that going back to that cold open, really stuck with me, and maybe it's just because we're in a very dark place in the world right now, so I was looking for something a little less bleak, where I could get it. And there's two different sequences in the film that kind of do enough to combat the bleakness of the overall viewpoint of the film, for either just like politically or character wise. And the first is just that montage of them having fun in the mall, and like there's not a zombie in sight, and they're just like trashing the place and having a blast, and Dario Argento's Goblin score is just thumping in the background, and especially comparing that to the 2004 version of that montage, which is not nearly as playful and uplifting. But I think that while it's clearly trying to say something that is bleak, the fact that they're able to do this in a way that is still like, it is pop entertainment still. This is not like, a European art film trying to like,
Totally.
make you feel the passage of time while you're watching it. And the second sequence is just straight up the pieing the zombies in the face, and the guy trying to take his blood pressure in the middle of the attack. Just like you said, it's gonzo. It's just like so absurdist to the point of like, and another thing that may like not play well, I think, with maybe younger audiences today, because horror has become so much about, the at a mainstream level anyways, the amount, like how much it can scare you, how much gore it can pack in, or just like how darkly lit, like you take a look at not trying to get a rise out of you, Dan, but like the way the mall was presented in like the Last of Us TV show, and the way that it's presented in Stranger Things, it's like the only thing that felt a little similar this time was actually and we covered this on an episode, the Fear Street series. And you mentioned, Karl, specifically like the idea of like the mall as this 90s cultural symbol. And I think that was very well done in that third installment in that trilogy. And the fact that you can say something that is dark while also like bringing light to the matter in, yes, a dark, like depraved, to use your earlier word, Karl, but it proves that horror can have a sense of humor, and it's essentially, two sides of the same coin. So I think that for all of the bleakness in the messaging, if you're going to go super academic with it, notwithstanding, you have ultimately still a popcorn flick that plays super well, kind of like Assault on Precinct 13 does. There's some really messed up politics and views on humanity in that film, and still it's just like, I'm sorry, I want to see the little girl get shot with the ice cream cone. And yes, that makes me depraved, but it's also just like, I need some sugar with my savory.
They shoot kids in this movie too. Remember in the airport scene? It depends on that's another thing too. We should there's so many different cuts of this movie.
Oh, right.
Like, I don't know what everybody saw, but I decided to watch the complete cut, which is like 2.5 hours long. And it's got like the Argento cut and like the Cons cut. It's like all over the place. But there's a lot of different versions that's going around. It's also kind of like a little bit hard to find. I feel like it used to be
It is.
Yeah, I don't think you can like stream it anywhere. I don't know. I don't know if it's like losing favor or something, or it's got caught up with the wrong company now in terms of rights. But it's a little bit harder to find. Although it's free on YouTube, all these different cuts, so check it out on YouTube. Karl, did you think, going back to Chris's point about it being a popcorn movie, which I have to agree with you on 100%. Did you kind of feel that way when you were watching it for the first time? Did it feel engaging and entertained and kind of flowing along, or was it kind of, did you feel it was like bleak, like the movie Threads or something like that?
Oh yeah, no, it definitely. I mean, I was thoroughly entertained by it, even though I had all these things in the back of my mind, like there's all these moments where Romero makes it a point to remind you that this is fun, whether with the music choices, or I know I probably shouldn't laugh at it, but when Peter has to kill the two twins and has to like toss one or toss both of them like onto the couch, like which apparently he was uncomfortable with, which I'm glad it is an uncomfortable thing. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and especially that last little bit when it really, really turns into Assault on Precinct 13, when it's just this motorcycle gang just wreaking havoc in this mall, and it becomes like a cowboys and outlaws kind of shootout thing. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I actually think I didn't realize until like an hour ago when I was doing research that they had that original ending when Francine and Peter both died, or I think they both commit suicide,
Yeah,
actually.
suicide.
I'm
Yeah.
glad they cut that out
Yes.
because I think you need for this, I don't know if it's for this movie to work, but at least for enjoyment purposes, you need the heroes to somewhat win. The ending is still, in a way, melancholic because they truly don't know where they're going to end up. Um, but at the very least, you know that they're still fighting, despite the fact that all this is happening around them, and to the point
Yeah.
of, how do people react to tragedy? They don't just lay down and take it at the end. They almost do, but they decide to push on, which I do think is true in a lot of senses of the way that we experience society now, especially as we go through these same cycles, it seems, over and over again. And yeah, I found that entertaining. And then, which is why I also get so annoyed at that credits, that camcorder credit sequence in the remake. But that is another
It's
point.
perfect. It's a perfect segue to talk about the
let's do it.
2004 Zack Snyder's version of Dawn of the Dead, which, man, it is. I feel like this version of Dawn of the Dead is a movie that I could talk about like a lot. The original Dawn of the Dead I could like gush about for like hours and just talk, and but the 2004 version is so, it rips me into pieces almost. Like I love the movie just in terms of it being a zombie movie. It's really exciting. It's an action horror movie, right? But it being linked to the original, it just like takes away so much of that film. And I don't know what your all responses are to it, but do you guys have that sort of torture relationship with it? I want to. It's funny. I want to hate it. I don't like Zack Snyder at all. I hate his work pretty much across the board. We did Army of the Dead on this show. What was that? A few years ago.
Yep, that was a bad choice.
Unwatchable. I mean, unwatchable. Despite the fact when I was doing research for it, I was like, I kind of like this guy as a person, but I hate him as a filmmaker. In terms of like him talking about the techniques of making the film, he's so into it. He loves everything about it. Like he's going into like all these like specialty lenses that he found in Japan. He's such a nerd about these things, but he makes terrible movies.
That cold open is the best indication of that. The cold open still holds up. That's the one part of that movie that I remembered shot for shot, moment for moment. I remembered everything about it because it's so incredibly good.
It is. Yeah.
But then when he has to deal with characters, this is when the problem comes in.
He just can't do it. Like he just can't do it. Chris, what do you got?
Well, with the character thing, we have to bring up the fact that this is a James Gunn screenplay, which means something very different today than it perhaps did back in 2004. Yeah. I mean, he got death threats because at that time he was the Scooby-Doo guy, right?
Yeah.
And so I can imagine people being skeptical, and going back, especially after just being inundated with so much James Gunn stuff, especially because like I've got kids, and so like they're into the superhero movies. I can't help but like just it pains me to like pick apart this screenplay, which has such a like touchstone to look up to in terms of like, Dawn of the Dead is definitely more message than it is character, but like, and part of it's the cast too, going back to that, bootstrap kind of mentality and vibe that was going on there. But like, I cared about Peter. I cared about everybody in that movie that that we were following. And here it's just like, even with the cold open, which I was just like, watching them back to back, like, I agree. I think the cold open is probably the best aspect of the film, the best sequence of the film, just in terms of like how thrilling it is and how well shot it is. But there's something so like special and unique and like chaotic about the cold open in the original with the newsroom, and how you just get dropped into like this war scenario, and you kind of get dropped in here too, but it still is like, I think it's also indicative of the character problem in this remake, where it's like Sarah Polley's a nurse and she's got a live-in boyfriend or husband, and then he turns and it's this exciting, chase, and that's it. Like we still like, I don't know why I should care. I kind of like, especially in that first, screening in the movie theater, I'm like, okay, I'm in. So now tell me more about this person. Nothing.
No,
it's just like
pass. No,
right.
What's the point?
I mean, James Gunn clearly, and Zack Snyder is not doing him any favors either, bringing it to the screen. But it's just like, it's right there on the page. It's like there's nothing. Like the only kind of character he knows how to write, at least back then, was the smart ass like villain type character, Ty Burrell, right?
Yeah. He's the most clearly
exactly,
which is a huge problem.
It's a huge problem, and especially the way that he writes the women in this script is like, did we go backward in time? Are we sure this is 25 years later?
It's wild because Fran in the original has so much agency. She literally has a
she's
line
awesome.
where she's like, "Include me in your plans."
Yeah.
No, I think that's like, there was something about the early 2000s when the horror remake thing started to happen. I think it really got kicked off the year before with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which came out in 2003. You guys remember that one with Jessica Biel?
I did not see it.
Yeah.
You remember that? That movie was massive. But it was one of those things where, like, okay, it's called Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's the same name as the original. You see this thing, and you're like, and as someone who had seen the original back then, I was like, what the hell does this have to do with Texas Chainsaw? It's like sort of similar. Yeah, in name only. And I think in sort of reading about the conception and production of Dawn of the Dead 2004, what comes up over and over again from Snyder or Gunn or the producers of the original, who they had to get approval for to remake this movie, is that it's not a remake. It's a reimagining. And they say that over and over and over again. Reimagining. It's not, it's not a shot for shot. We're not using the Romero script. We're not doing any of that.
So could they imagine a good script?
Well, that's what kind of blows my mind about it, because like I in general really like Gunn stuff across the board. And this does not, I don't know, this doesn't really feel like this is his script on the screen.
No.
This feels like a lot of Zack sort of, hey, what's a really cool shot that we could do? What's a really cool sequence that we could do? And I think what blows my mind about it, and what it also, made me conflicted when I saw it. And this is the thing, it's like this really weird thing where I think it's a good action horror movie if you change the name from Dawn of the Dead to something else. Like Zombie Mall or whatever, right? You know what I mean?
Zombie
like direct to video.
Yeah, exactly. If you change the name and didn't try to like connect it back to Dawn of the Dead much, it actually works really, really well. The hard part here, and this is the part that I struggle with a lot as I'm getting older too, because I'm going to sound like a boomer right now. I frequent some subreddits and stuff like that, and Dawn of the Dead 2004 comes up all the time on like the horror subreddit, on movie subreddit, whatever. And I'm hearing, these people who are in their 20s or younger or maybe 30s talking about it. And I hear people say things like, oh, the original is kind of like hard to watch, or it's like, slapped together, but I like the 2004 version better. And they say stuff like that. And that's where my skin sort of crawls. And I get like, I just like, it's almost hard to relate the two movies, despite the fact they have the same name and they're inspired by a similar story, because the 2004 one is so incredibly different. It's so different. It has different aims. Even when Gunn is talking about the script, where he's talking about like, what is that, like redemption or something?
Yeah.
that doesn't factor into the original at all.
No.
So it's like, I don't know. I want to like I want to hate this movie, but I also can't hate the 2004 version because it's so much fun.
It honestly is really well made. Like the set pieces are so good. And especially, 28 Days Later was a couple years before this.
Yeah.
And it feels in a way that an extension of that style of zombie movie. And that's exciting because they can run and they can open stuff and they can do all that. And so it adds a complication to the zombie story. But it feels like, and maybe again, I don't know what was in the original screenplay, because the other thing that's missing is the humor that is in every single Gunn screenplay. There's essentially a humorless movie.
There's jokes in it, but it is humorless. You're right.
Exactly. I couldn't get over the fact that the coffee shop was called Hallowed Grounds. I didn't know if that was a joke or what, but I found it laughable. But the action set pieces are so incredibly, incredibly well done. And so I see why, especially a certain generation of movie people have such an affinity for this, because it does feel in like the tapestry of like horror. I don't know if it's a turning point or just like a peak or what, but like it does feel, and again, like the fact that I remembered that cold open so well, like, oh, it had impact. It still had impact. Even if the rest of it, the people in it specifically are so forgettable. And the one other point, just before I forget, is this was the era too where we had so many horror movies that would randomly have racism just in them for no reason.
Yeah.
And this is the one movie that doesn't, and honestly maybe could have used some of it. Just to say something, or like if you're trying to do the redemption thing, like Mekhi Phifer's character could have done something. It would have been stereotypical, it would have been cringy, but it would have been something.
That is like a weird both misstep and also just like just the when they recognize each other, Mekhi Phifer and Ving Rhames, as like opposing black stereotypes, where it's just like, he's the thug that could care less about anybody else versus he's the church going Law and Order guy, and it's just, but then they like don't do anything with either of those stereotypes either. They just become obviously I don't this bugged me when I first saw it, and it bugged me again at the rewatch, since we're talking about Mekhi. That feels like such a strange like left turn for when they introduce his character and his girlfriend who's pregnant to where we wind up with Zombie Baby, where it just like I feel like something was left on the cutting room floor, right, to actually like connect the pieces there, right, to make it feel like there was actually some kind of arc. And that's like it just feels like storytelling 101, these kinds of things that you miss it the first time, especially if you watch it with other people and you're just like totally buzzed out by the thrill and the propulsion of it all. But then you take a step back and you're just like, wait, like and you got the Best Buy TV salesman to like the biggest like everyman failure. Like I still can't remember what the guy's name was.
Oh god, yeah. He's the throwaway white guy protagonist.
Right. It's just that's the thing, is like it's so important, and Gunn figures this out. Like I don't love a lot of his movies, but like that became one of his strengths, is not only his humor but his ability to like build an ensemble cast, and the fact that like it's clear he's trying. That's the only thing that feels Gunn-ish about it. But then it almost feels like setting up a whole bunch of bowling pins and then just like walking away from them, where it's like is it silly for me to like want my horror movie to also like be well written? Like if it's going to be well shot, if it's going to be technically proficient, I need something to hold on to, otherwise I'm just gonna like walk away with it. Like I knew we were going to do this episode, so I picked up the DVD for $1 at a garage sale.
Perfect.
In the fall.
Only way you should watch it is like scratch deep.
Right. But then I'm just like, and so then whenever I pick up like a random DVD like that, I'm just like, should I hold on to this, or am I ever gonna? I'm like, no, this is going into the drop off at Goodwill bag, and it's so gross. So I need to find out what you guys think about this ending and what the thought was, other than just it's the 2000s and we're trying to make horror more grisly, and so we're going to like go out on the most dour note possible.
Carl, you go for it. What's your thoughts on the ending of this Dawn of the Dead 2004?
Oh God, it's funny because when I saw it, when the credits came up, I was like, oh yes, my enemy, it's back. I forgot about you. And it's also whatever theoretical goodwill you build up with with Sarah Pauli's character, or with the TV guy character, or Ving Rhames' character. I like how it's Sarah Pauli, Ving Rhames, and TV guy, because I don't know. Whatever goodwill you do, and he has this weird oh yeah, I'm staying behind. He's like,
oh my God,
and just came out of nowhere too. He's it became emotional. I was like, wait, did I miss something? Did they like each other that much?
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I see okay, this is maybe sweet-ish. It could have been sweet, whatever. And that goddamn, sorry, I don't know if I could cuss on this.
No, go for it.
This fucking end credit sequence happens, and you remove any intention that you could have had with this movie, because okay, maybe they're not the most etched out characters. Maybe you don't care about that much. And to your point, your horror needs to make you care about these people, because you don't just want them to just die. You want to not want them to die. That's what makes horror fun. And by making them theoretically die in the most unceremonious way, off screen on a shaky camcorder while Ty Burrell is sleeping with young women,
oh my God,
it's kind of an insult to what you theoretically could have done with it. And maybe it's honestly made me more angry about it than I should be, because because I watched the first movie and I'm like, oh, this movie, you really do care. Even when Steven, an annoying character on all intents and purposes, dies, or Roger, all the men except for Peter are annoying. I cared. I was like, oh, that's sad. Damn. They were taken by, the forces of Roger masculinity, and Steven the lack thereof, I guess. But this is oh no, we're just gonna kill him.
I mean, the ending of the 2004 one is just, I agree, it's infuriating, because it's up until that point, I'm with the movie, I'm with the death machines that they build with I don't know, it's ridiculous. It's like a monster truck.
The chainsaw.
You can see Zack Snyder in the periphery being like, this is badass, and
it's his whole evolution as a filmmaker in one film. By the end, you're just like, what are you doing? I think the thing about it for me, and this is, I'm gonna try and work this into a broad question and see if it works or not. The ending is such a false and kind of pathetic attempt to say something profound, right? And he can't do it. Zack Snyder, whatever, he's technically, I think, a decent filmmaker. He has a lot of interest in lenses and stuff, which is really cool, but he's a terrible narrative filmmaker. He just can't do it. And he's trying to say something very profound with his very bleak ending. He's trying to, I think, even harken back to maybe Night of the Living Dead, which has a very, very bleak ending from 1968.
True.
He's trying to do that. And a lot of 70s horror films have these endings. And we saw this sort of resurgence of this and quote unquote elevated horror in the last decade, 15 years. With these very just sort of pitch black endings. But a lot of those movies had something to say. He has nothing to say. What I'm interested in trying to sort of ask here is that the original Dawn of the Dead, I think, had a ton to say. I think we could all agree with that. And a lot to say about society, a lot to say about politics, and about America specifically. Horror, in terms of the whole zombie phenomenon, Dawn of the Dead 2004 helped kick off this resurgence of zombie art, we'll call it. The biggest show on TV for a while was The Walking Dead. There's tons of zombie movies that came out after this. Do we feel like, I guess the question here is like, the zombie sort of artifact or lens through which filmmakers and TV makers are using it now, has it lost its critical sort of potency? Because when Romero did it in 68 and was it 78, this one, and then 85 was Day of the Dead, those are, I mean, I would consider each one of those movies to be a political polemic.
Not Land of the Dead or Diary of the Dead?
Attempted polemics, especially Land of the Dead. But now, zombies became very popular in the last 20 years. And now they've obviously faded in the last 5-6 years to some degree. Do we feel like the zombies have any play left? Like, does that, like, the critical and political criticism that was implicit in a lot of Romero's work, is that all gone now? Did Zack Snyder ruin the zombie genre?
See, I don't know if Snyder ruined it so much as your guy Frank Darabont did.
Okay, Walking Dead, not a fan.
No, I mean, like, I do really like that first season still.
It's a great season. Yeah.
It was maybe the beginning of the oversaturation. But like Karl was mentioning earlier, like the 2000s in general were, and like you were saying with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, is like the 2000s kind of ruined a lot of stuff. It brought horror. It's what helped us get to, like, as much as we hate the term elevated horror and like indie horror on a different level, like we got to a good place. Perhaps you had to go through the shit to get to something decent. But I don't know. I feel like there was still something so fresh about it at the time. And clearly, like, it still has a lot of pull today. As like, it's weird because like a lot of younger people would refer to this as like an old movie now, right? The 2004
it's a classic
version. It's a classic
film.
And so I think that there's this disconnect, not only between those that grew up with Romero or that go and rediscover Romero versus those that like just want their meat and potatoes, and so they go to Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead. But there's also then that disconnect between like the post oversaturation. Like, I don't know, like I mentioned The Last of Us earlier, that seems to be still like both palatable and popular among wide audiences, especially horror audiences. They're still doing like spin-off series of The Walking Dead. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're still going. I haven't seen any of them, but they're still. Yeah, Andrew Lincoln's still involved. Reedus is still involved. It's still happening somehow. It is kind of sad when you think about it.
So I just feel like it's played out, but I don't know if it's necessarily Snyder's fault as much as I want to pin it on him.
What I actually, as you were talking, I think I started to form something in my head that zombie movies, especially in the era of Romero, were a means to strip the world of its specifics and bear it down to the grittiness of humanity, of society. Like, you get down to those specific conventions of how we think about our society in a way that we can't really do with other horror tropes like vampires or I don't know, what are the other ones? Serial killers, things like that. And what Dawn of the Dead did that I think 28 Days Later didn't do is it instead used zombies as a way of making horror action. Which then, to your point, is what carried Walking Dead on. And again, I think the first season of Walking Dead also is quite good because it is about the characters living in a place that is stripped of the conventions of sane society. And then it's like, okay, we got through that. As you get deeper and deeper into it, like, that society's gone. Now we're just forming new societies. And so now it's just about the action part. Whereas other horror movies, I think, because they're so much more personal, or horror tropes that are so much more personal based, like ghosts or vampires, etc. You're able to, I think, come up with new versions of that, but zombies are just so large scale that
Right.
you can only really do it on that scale. Like now I'm thinking about World War Z, like same thing. Like there's
Yeah.
just about, not just about, like I think that actually finds almost a middle ground of those two things, even if it doesn't completely come together at the end. But it is action focused. Like that's where I feel like the genre has gone. And now I think I don't know what we can do with it now, because post pandemic, any commentary you could do with it is going to feel, two on the head, two on the nose.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like, it's actually way worse than.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's another thing too. Like, go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I was worried about that with Last of Us. I wasn't as much of a fan as other people were of the first season, but it
How
did
dare
feel.
you, Chris? How dare you?
I know how you feel, Dan. But it was weird watching this kind of story about a very, like, wide scale disease that renders some people a certain way, and
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the open. Oh, sorry, I'm talking over you. Go ahead.
No. I feel like I'm going somewhere and I can't figure it out. So go ahead.
Well, like the thing that blows my mind is like that opening the discussion between the scientists and like the news host or whatever.
Right.
Like you listen to that, and like this alone makes Romero a genius. Because like you're listening to this, and this is literally the discussion that has played out in the United States for the last 40 years. And it is the same exact result of experts telling us that things are wrong and we're not, climate change, capitalism in general, mass media, all these people telling us, hey, alarm, 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 things are wrong, things are wrong, things are wrong. And then we're at where we're at right now. And I think the thing that like I think is the most maybe depressing and also maybe the most alluring to the original Dawn of the Dead is that he was right.
Yeah.
He was right about all of it, about how things would fall apart, about how all of these systems and institutions that we hold dear that were built over centuries of like hard work can just fall apart and go away. I mean, I'm reading the news on like an hourly basis, and it's just like, yeah, this is all happening. And it's funny, today is George Romero's birthday when we're recording. 1, 2, also a news story dropped today. The Monroeville Mall that this movie was shot in, the inspiration for the entire story was just bought by Walmart. Right? Like,
no way.
So like it is, I think that's the thing that like in my head, it's like I love the original so much. I felt like he was right about so many different things about American society, but it also depresses the hell out of me that he was right. I didn't want him to be right. I wanted to be like the misanthrope on the side that was just complaining about things and saying things are bad. But like now he like, oh, it's coming true. And I'm like, oh my God, this is terrible. We got to go to trivia, Chris. I can't go on
Thank you for ending us there, Dan. Wow. Okay. We gotta end this on a bright spot. So Karl, please do what our guests usually do and crush Dan in trivia. The way this works is this graphic that I sent over to you guys, you have in front of you. At the end of the document, it is 12 remakes from the 2000s, and I'm gonna read excerpt of a critic's review of the remake and see if you can guess it just based off the quote. And the first person to guess it correctly gets the point. Best out of 5 wins.
And just yell it out. So no turns. Just go for it.
Yeah, I'll next time we have you on, I'll send you a buzzer in the mail if you want. Here we go. Number 1. This is from David Denby of the New Yorker. I know there are intelligent people who are awed by this sort of deep dish magical mystery tour, but surely something is wrong with a movie when you can't tell a live character from a dead one and you don't care which is which.
Oh.
The Day the Earth Stood Still?
Nope.
Hmm.
Red Dragon?
Nope.
Solaris.
There you go, Dan. Nice work.
Because I kind of thought that too when I was watching it, because I was an idiot. But
no, interesting. That was another one I was playing with because I have really fond memories of it, but I have fond memories of it having watched it before seeing the original. Similar to, I think
it's a good. That remake's great. I love it.
It's Soderbergh. You can't do that bad.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 2. Michael Atkinson of The Village Voice said this: "The formula is so risible and rote by now that the natural reaction to scenes of peril, torture, and suffering is flippant laughter."
The Last House on the Left.
Great guess, but no.
Oh, that's what I thought. I was going to guess it and win it. Oh my god, that's what I thought.
Funny Games, no.
Whoa.
Red Dragon?
There you go. Wow, Dan was 2 for 2. But yes, that was maybe a not super fair one, because I think all 3 of those movies it could very much apply to.
It felt like Last House on the Left. It felt like
But I gotta stand with my Red Dragon haters. If we're gonna talk about Rat Snyder, it's Brett Ratner.
Brett Ratner.
Oh man, imagine the team up. Okay,
yikes! Barf.
This is from Kenneth Turan of the Los Angeles Times. This contemporary remake of the classic knew what it was doing when it cast, and then the name of the lead, the movie's greatest stone face since Buster Keaton.
The greatest stone face since Buster Keaton. 3:10 to Yuma.
Nope.
Actually, I know Planet of the Apes.
Wahlberg, no.
Jesus.
Departed?
Nope.
Oh.
Assault on Precinct 13?
Nope.
Wow.
Wait, is it? If it's Hairspray,
no, it's not Hairspray.
The Day the Earth Stood Still. Is it
Keanu? There you go, Carl. It's Keanu.
Who else
Kenneth
was in
Turan
that?
was onto something in 08. John Hamm. Oh man, I was so bored in the theater. And then we talked to
what's her name in that? The lady from AMC commercials.
Maria Menounos?
No.
Nicole Kidman?
Nicole Kidman. Is she in that one or a different one?
No, she's in the Invasion.
Oh, she's in The Invasion, which I have an obsession with.
Oh,
as a
really?
child. As a kid, I don't know, as a kid, like I don't know. I watched it so many times. I don't know why.
That's an interesting movie.
It's a bad movie, but I watched it so many times.
I mean, Nicole Kidman can carry anything.
Number
4. Yeah, that's true. Number 4. This is from your guy, Dan, Mick LaSalle of the San Francisco Chronicle.
Mick LaSalle.
Just because it's a conscious commentary on other vile, useless, pointless cinematic exercises doesn't make it any less vile, useless, and pointless.
Funny Games.
Funny Games,
yeah, absolutely.
I think I remember reading that review from him.
Hey, hot take. I think the Funny Games remake's not bad.
I don't either.
Yeah,
Michael Pitt.
Michael Pitt's, he's got layers, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's shot for shot, but he's good, and Brady Corbet.
Yeah. That's right. Oh my gosh.
Think about
the next Best Director winner.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's. You guys were very close on that one, but it's kind of half and half. We're not really keeping score.
We'll do a
It's just for fun.
tiebreaker.
We'll call this a tiebreaker.
I'm so bad at trivia. I get so scared.
You're the same as me. I get petrified every time I do that.
I do this because I like to instill fear in my mind.
I'm just waiting for Hairspray to come up.
Number 5 from Owen Gleiberman of Entertainment Weekly. Read him obsessively growing up.
RIP. Is Entertainment Weekly dead or no?
Yeah, probably.
Oh no, it's like online only now.
Yeah.
You can get on your iPad.
E-dubs. Okay. A fizzy and delirious high camp message movie musical that may just turn out to be the happiest movie of the summer.
Yeah, Hairspray. Oh,
There you go.
Oh no, it's actually. Can you imagine? It's like, it's Funny
The
Games.
Italian Job.
Yeah,
Italian,
Last House on the
ew.
Left, the most delightful movie of the summer.
No, I had to put Hairspray in. We did a episode on the original John Waters classic.
So
It
good.
was so fun, and honestly, the remake too. That was a good example. I think, in my opinion, what's the take with the group?
I like the remake. I think it's good.
No, I think the remake's great. Honestly,
Yeah,
It's fun.
awesome. It's so much fun. Carl, this was a lot of fun too. Not quite as fun as Hairspray, but very fun. Thank you for joining us.
What do you got going
Thanks
on,
so much
Carl?
for
Anything
having
coming up you want to plug? Anything going on?
No.
Just go see Black Christmas.
No, find me on everything. Well, not everything now, with the world the way it is. Social media is weird. But I'm on Letterboxd for sure.
Yeah.
It's just my name.
SmashCutReviews.com, right?
I'm at SmashCutReviews.com. Yes, you can.
Nice. Thanks for joining us. What do we got coming up, Chris? We got
it's
90s
Cape
next
Fear
week. Cape Fear. We're doing the 80s, The Fly, King Kong the 70s, and then closing out with Fistful of Dollars, and then the Maltese Falcon to close out the Visionary Remake season. Thanks for listening. This has been Film Trace.